Yes, my name is Dorinda. I'm from Oakland, California, and I was just wondering when I'm reading or thinking about the Kemetic, the ancient Egyptians, some of them I didn't know, was I supposed to take them symbolically or literally, like Thoth, and so many others. I didn't. I was taught that wasn't real. Are they real or
Yes,
symbolic?
they are real.
Symbolic.
They're real.
Oh, oh,
But the thing, what's
okay.
happened is that the real stories, the real incidents, have kind of got Chinese whispers, or then they got mixed up, and then different people who couldn't interpret what the incident was about, they kind of made it up or added different things to it or claim it to be them. It's like even today, there are people who would try and claim being the master teacher, but then they can't do the work. So if you put them to the test, or they don't allow themselves to be in a position where everyone can scrutinize and question them to know for themselves, because we know things not just by reading, but by our eyes, by our energy, by what we feel and how we resonate with people. So, yes, there are true stories, true people that had children and walked the earth. And because the depiction of some of these ancestors are like with masks on, because even myself, before I really learned and studied the Egyptology by way of the master teacher, I was even wondering why these beings had these heads of animals and things like that. And in religion,
Yeah.
they then made it like it was pagan. We worship, pagans and all statues and all this kind of thing. And then when you study, you realize that these were just masks, and they were depicting ceremonies that were taking place, or a being that was related to a particular nature in terms of what they did or their job. They got associated with a particular animal, like a falcon, or in terms of Horus, or like Tahuti being the scribe and having that beak. That beak is symbolic of the quill, which is like what we would call a pen today, something that was used to write, because he was an author, and he wrote a lot of sciences and the information pretty much that's on the planet today. And then he traveled around or incarnated in different times to reset
Yeah.
things like what's happening today. And the cultures that he went to or taught, they gave him a name or called him a particular name. And so the people that knew him by the name of their language or culture, this is why he's known as Thoth, he's known as Tahuti, um, he's known by the
Herman
Greek,
or something.
yeah, Hermes, Trismegistus, and different cultures then would label him a different name. And in the case of, this is another thing that ties into the Bill Carson thing, that I when I watched that part where he was saying that this Jesus went to India, and we have already taught and we teach that there were three different Jesuses, and so it wasn't the same one that went to it, because the brother was saying to him, how could he have walked this distance from here? Because there were different people, and the one that went to India was known as Saint Isa by the people in India, and that till this day, this is why you have Christians from India, even though that's not their original way of life, because the one that traveled there and taught, and he learned, the Kabbalah and certain things, and then you had another one. So if you don't know that information, then someone who's saying to you, how can that make sense that you have three different people in three different places at the same time? These are the types of things that you can't, if you can't decipher it, you're going to get caught up, because it would be like, how can you be in three places at the same time if you're the same person? But that's just to give you an example. But yes, our family in ancient Egypt, like, again, the last thing I would say in relation to that is like the story of Osiris and his brother Seth. And these are not even the
Yes.
names that they use, because they had tritones or three-part names. So Asar, Asaru, and that became, what shall I say, Usia, Asaru, and Asar became Osiris in Greek, because they then translated that being, that person, into Osiris. The same with the female, his wife, who we know as Arashtat, which became Ashtat, which became Isis, and then she's then known by many, many names in different culture, Ashtaroth, so many names. But then you have Seth, supposedly becomes the bad guy because of what he did with Osiris, and then of course their offspring being Haru, again people say Hiru, Haru, Ha, and it becomes Horus in Greek, you see. So depending on the culture and who's telling the story, they will try and claim them or use the language that they're familiar with. So I know I gave you quite a lot, but if there's anything you want to come back on that, or if there's anything I missed out, please go ahead, because this is the last
I just
question.
have one more thing. Did Thoth was he a pharaoh for 5,000 years? Is that true?
Okay, again, the time, that's an excellent question. The time thing, like people will tell you that, for example, Noah lived for 925 years and this person lived for this amount of time. And that is a distortion as well, because what it is that although depending on which time zone you're using to measure time, because we measure time based on the planet rotating around the sun, that gives us 365 or less, because they mess about with the different time zones and leap years and taking days on and off, because the Gregorian calendar is what we're going by, but different time calendars use different times. So I'm saying that to say, like, the legacy of somebody surviving for a long time. So for example, people that like Michael Jackson or Bob Marley or people like James Brown, people that have left a legacy and they've long gone until they fade away to the point where no one is talking about them anymore, because there are people like even the Caucasian Elvis. Well, he was actually a Venerian or from another star system, which is a completely different story. But their legacy has lasted for, say, hundreds of years, and that people will say they lived for that length of time, but not necessarily that they lived that long. But there are also people who, before we started to die in terms of our genetics and like being mixed in, we could live a lot longer. And there are people who are able to, like, for example, the story of the person people call Adafa, who was taken up and he didn't actually die in that sense. And there are people who, even now, like you have astronauts or people who like go to space, and because they're now in a different time zone, when they come back, they haven't aged, because you're not affected by the rules of, being here, like what makes you age when you're here. And so there's so many different aspects of what's going on, and depending on the story, the time, the location, the people telling the story, this is why we have to always make people realize that with each incident, we have to go into the right knowledge or the actual facts about it, and not just based on the religious stories that have been handed over for generation and generation. I hope that helps.
Thanks. Yes, it did. Thank you.
You're welcome.